Magda, welcome. Magda Fox is with me today, guys, on this episode of the Advisory Board podcast. Magda, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, let me do an introduction. So Magda, guys, she comes with a really unique skill set, and I'm really glad that we have her today. She has been, is it 15 years or so now? She's been a consultant helping people improve their sales processes. And specifically, she's got a lot of experience working in the franchising industry, helping franchise systems improve their know-how and their skills and their processes, systematizing sales in a way that helps them increase. I know before, and we won't be talking about any names today, but she mentioned to me that she helped somebody in a year go from $5 million to $12 million in sales, getting some training and help and support. So the beauty of the franchise model in the world of Magda is if you can fix the process and systematize it, that can immediately scale across 200 units. So Magda, I'm going to stop talking, let you introduce yourself for a minute, but thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you, Dave. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting topic, and I hope everybody enjoyed today's podcast because, hey, what's not fun about lead handling, and sales processes and effective closing? It's all great stuff. Yeah. I'm sure everybody's excited about that. But that's what I help companies with because it seems like this is where the most value and need for my clients lies.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Tell us just a little bit about you and your company, Magda, as we get started, and then we'll jump right into some real topics that will help people improve their processes.
Wonderful. Yes, I have been, like you mentioned, in business, in sales management, and sales consulting for over 15 years now. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. I love sales myself. And at a certain point, I figure out I really love helping other people and then eventually other companies improve and get better at what they do and make the most out of the money they invest in marketing. Because there's definitely a huge connection between marketing, sales, right? And all the tools that comes in process with this. And when it comes to my company, it's Fox Marketing Advisors. And you can probably easily find me on LinkedIn under Magda Fox. So
great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Magda. And guys, I definitely, after you're done listening to her, you'll probably take her up on that offer to look her up on LinkedIn. Let's talk for just a minute about the challenges. And we were chatting about this right before we started recording. But in the franchise space specifically, there is a challenge that everybody faces. Doesn't matter who you are, but you start early on, everybody's like just eager to get some franchises on board. So they start hiring people who usually don't have any background or a real skill set in selling. And so what happens over time, the system will expand and grow, but the sales aren't increasing the way that they should. This is a typical symptom of an underlying problem. And so what I want to ask you, Magda, is as you're working with these folks, let's say they've been in business 10 years, 20 years, they've got 60 units, 200 units, and what they're seeing is kind of a stagnation of the sales, like it's not increasing year over year like they'd hoped. What are some of the key things that that you see these franchise systems have issues with, or where are the underlying causes that you would say in these systematically?
Well, there are several different ones. And, I'm going to talk in general terms because my conversation and my process with any client starts with a lot of questions, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just like going to a doctor. They don't prescribe just because they see you, right? They need to find out what's really hurting, where it really hurts. The underlying causes a lot of time comes to the systems, they either are too complicated, they use... there is no system. Maybe the system is falling, fell apart. Maybe it was long outdated. Maybe it was created for some other guys, let's say as another salesperson that was there at the beginning, and it doesn't work for the next salespeople or person. It works. There is also a problem often when they have so many different softwares that they don't know what is coming, what is going, how many things we have coming down the pipeline. Are we going to close something this quarter or not? What's going to happen really?
Yeah.
So to find out really about that, you really need to have a good system and process because that's one of the problems. There's too many softwares that don't talk to each other, too many systems, or just something very simple. The software that they're using, something like CRM, is just so complicated, the salespeople are just not using it. So which leads to, as you know, Dave, the management doesn't have any actually data that they can process. If they have no data, they don't know where the gaps in the process is. Where are we losing leads? How can we help our salespeople? So those are kind of the main underlying problems.
Yeah, it's that last point so interesting because a lot of franchise systems and even business operators, they operate a little blind, not knowing what's actually working. I had this conversation last week, I think it was last week, with a client. I just called him up to ask him how things were going, and he said they're great. I said, well, what's going great? And he's like, I just fired one of my lead suppliers. I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, John. He's like, no. I said, well, how'd you come to that conclusion? He's like, oh, I just looked at my dashboards and realized that my lead conversion rate was much lower for this when I was getting a lot of bad quality leads. So I just fired them and putting my money where it's going to make me more money. But most businesses, they really, to get to that level of data, they don't have the knowledge. They don't have the dashboards, or they're guessing. And sometimes they guess wrong, or they don't know. Sometimes you might get a lead source that works well in Georgia, but not well in New York City. And so sometimes it's a regional question that they can't answer also. Yeah, great feedback.
Very true.
Hey, well, let's talk. So we've got, I think, 3 areas or main topics that we want to talk about. And I'll look over here because I've got a couple of things I want to make sure we talk about. But we're going to talk about lead handling, sales process, and then effective closing. And nobody freak out. We're not going to go Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross on anybody here today. But look at Magda. You know,
Coffee for closers.
Yeah, she's not that person, but you're going to get a lot of good insights about it, guys. So let's talk about lead handling first, because I know you've got a lot of great experience here, Magda. Tell me about shortcomings that you see as you work with clients, and don't drop any names here, please. With respect to how they're handling their leads, where are they typically losing leads and not getting the most out of their marketing spend?
Great question, Dave. The main place where franchisors or businesses in general lose leads, it's actually could be in every step of the process, of the sales process. If we don't have correct data or software that shows us where we're losing it, it could be every step. Often I come to see clients and they may be losing anywhere between 60 to 90% of leads in every step of the sales process. So that's huge, right? If you think about how much money they're spending on the leads, that's a huge gap. Those are huge gaps in the process. Often companies can have fantastic software, like even yours, that shows them every step of the way, how they're doing, right? We're moving from step 1, from hello to, can we have another phone call? Can we discuss the details about our deal, right? Yeah. They may see where they're losing, but they get the client on the phone. The first conversation started, right? The beautiful leads come through. The marketing did a fantastic job. And now what? What do I do next? You know, what is my process? And the truth is, if the client, if the franchisor or the business doesn't have a clear journey to close, then even the best salesperson will lose huge percentage of leads. Yeah. It's just what it is. You know, and again, going back to not evaluating the data on a regular basis is another problem in lead handling. Maybe because it's hard to retrieve the data. Maybe because, like several of my clients I have seen this, Dave, they have so many different softwares or spreadsheet or Google Sheets or whatever that says, here comes the leads from this source, here comes the leads from this source, here comes from this leads from this source, and they are never talking to each other. So to retrieve the data and actually provide the information to the sales manager saying, hey, you got 100 leads, you closed 50 in the first stage, and so on, and give them reason to improve, give them data where they need to improve will be huge. And that's, you know, why I appreciate your software. It comes, you know, it provides so much transparency that I think most clients would really appreciate having this kind of transparency in what they need in their job to get their job done well.
I appreciate you saying that. The funny thing is, though, Magda, what you're saying is, even if you have the data, if you're not regularly evaluating it, it doesn't do you any good at all. So whether that's in 4 different spreadsheets or 2 software packages and a Power BI queue over here, if you're not looking at it and knowing what to look for, and then being able to spot the gaps and saying, oh, there's a performance issue here, we've got attrition at that stage. A lot of times data doesn't show you the answers, but data shows you the right questions and where to focus your attention in the process. But if you're not evaluating it, you're not even getting that. So it's just throwing spaghetti on a wall.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. I'm glad you brought that up. What would you see? I mean, because these are kind of the symptoms we're seeing, I took a few notes, but they don't know what to say when they answer the phone, right? The lead comes in and they call them and like, oh, I don't know. Or they don't have a clear journey. Like generally speaking, how do you identify that? Or how would, if I'm the franchise owner and I see, and there's a gap in a knowledge of what to say or a process issue or even a technology issue, what should I be looking for to really evaluate that?
Wow, that's a big loaded question because there's so many answers to it. First of all, it's super helpful. I know that may feel like a big brother, but it's just beautiful tool to the salespeople and to the sales manager to record the calls. Mm-hmm. Every salesperson will struggle with something else. First of all, I think they should have unified sales process, but mm-hmm. then every salesperson, every person have different struggles, right? Mm-hmm. So if you listen to the phone calls and if you see where they excel, maybe that can help another salesperson, right? If they're doing something really well, or if they just having trouble with transition from one point to another, well, that could be easy fix. Just to give you an example, Dave, one of my clients was doing really well all the way to the point where they had to present the FDA documents, right? And at this point, 50 to 90% of leads just disappear, start ghosting him, just move on, just he could never get hold of them. It became the chase game, right? Yeah. So unfulfilling to any salesperson who has thought they had a good conversation with the client, with the prospects, and here it's a dead stop.
Yeah.
We adjusted to something very simple in this point by just creating actually Zoom call. Mm-hmm. And actually show the documents with the clients and go step by step. So instead of overwhelming the prospects with huge document that is so big, I'm sure you have seen several of those.
FDDs, yeah, they're hundreds of pages sometimes.
Exactly, yeah. FDDs, and they are so full of legal wording because they need to be that way, right?
Right.
Prospects were just overwhelmed. They would just give up. They felt embarrassed that they didn't understand the document, and they just decided to disengage from the prospect. So by just fixing that little problem in this case particular, that we just got on the call with the clients on the Zoom and sharing the screen and showing this is what this point means. Do you have questions and so on? We actually transitioned from losing a lot of clients to moving most of the clients to the next stage.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny you bring that up on the FranDev side. That's usually when you send out the questionnaire and then when you send out the FDD and the item 23, that's where you start to see big cliffs in drop-off rates. If you have good quality leads. Otherwise, it's right at the beginning too, because you get a lot of tire kickers that or you buy leads from a portal that sells them to 5 different consultants, and then by the time that you call them, they're already being harassed by 4 other people, and they're like, don't you dare call me again. I see those are the 3 areas. That's a really interesting insight about just getting on the phone and walking them through the FDD. Thank you for sharing.
And if you have so many leads coming through, right, Dave, that you salespeople have to sift through hundreds and hundreds of leads, you're going to see them disengaging, and you're also going to see them quitting. Mm-hmm. Because they're going to know that they can go somewhere else that gives them a better opportunity to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to improve and help your salespeople to be successful.
Yeah, a symptom of a tough sales process or something that's inadequate. The good salespeople don't stay. That's a myth. Good salespeople are always looking for the next thing, or the person who's going to provide them a system or an environment where they can really thrive. And if you've got salespeople that are staying a long time and your systems are broken, be aware, right? Like you probably don't have your A players on the team anymore, as your B and C guys or gals.
Yep.
Let me ask you another question, Magda. Can you share an example of like what does an ideal lead flow look like? Rather than ask you for a specific client example, but could you give us a walkthrough verbally of, if I were to set up a system from scratch, this is what I think it should look like to handle leads flow as they come in?
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, without providing any names, exact example of action that the companies that took really good example. Let me think for a second. First of all, what they start with evaluating the lead sources.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge, right? Franchisors buy hundreds of leads for every month from different sources.
Yeah.
So if they evaluate the source of leads on a weekly or monthly basis, they already increasing the rate of success significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you have to see it, right? You have to have access to it. So they need to have software that helps them with that, and easy access to transparency, like we mentioned that before. They also have recordings, like I mentioned, of calls, can determine where the breakdown in communication happens, where the gaps happens, because not everybody needs the same help. They can use the knowledge for improvements in processes, training, sales team. I hugely believe in full transparency. And I always talk to the teams when I come talk to them, like, listen, this is not about making you feel bad. This is about making you look like a superstar. Because if I help you, that means you're going to make more money. That means the company going to make more money. There's going to be more money to improve, and everybody just blossoms. So I come here to help. I'm not here to replace anything. People sometimes are scared for change. They worry about being criticized. This is not it. This is, setting your team for success is also talking to them, having a relationship with them. Kind of the opposite of Glenn Ross kind of, speech of, being a hard ass. Working with your team, it's very important. So that's kind of starts from the top, like I said, from leads handling, transparency, to working with your sales team.
Yeah, I hear you. It's funny. I just spent the weekend coaching baseball, and it's the exact same thing. Athletes and salespeople. I find really high-performing athletes tend to make very good salespeople. It doesn't matter whatever the sport is, but there's something about mindset there. But the athletes that get better and are on our roster are the ones that they take feedback and criticism, and even though they don't like it, and then they'll improve. Because I can see something from the outside, like you can, as a sales coach, mentor, strategist, that you can say, oh, clearly you're messing this part of your flow up, and they can't see it because they're in it every day. So I love it. Well, tell me, let's shift for a little bit and talk about sales process, Magda, because I'm sure as you work with your clients, you see a lot of folks falling short in the sales process. But even them, as you start to grow a franchise, they get busy. And the CEO now, rather than focusing on the selling and the sales training, they tend to focus on the franchise development process, the marketing, and they get pulled into other things. Where do you typically see your clients falling short with their sales processes?
I think in this moment, Dave, where they do get busy, running a business, running especially business like a franchise, it's huge undertaking. No matter what amount of people you hire for your support, for your operations, for your marketing, you always run short on people. Yeah. It's huge. So when you start running busy and so on, sales becomes kind of like an afterthought sometimes. At least that's how it feels to me as an outsider. Like, I have a fantastic product. Now let's find a couple people to sell it. Right? And it is an afterthought. Everything stands on the fact that if we sell it, we have a business. If we cannot sell it, if we don't have people that can sell it, that they have system and process, then everything falls down. It doesn't matter how great our operation is or our marketing, Right. It goes down to selling. Can we bring clients on board? Yeah. So if you're getting really busy and you don't have the expertise, then you start falling shorter and shorter behind, farther and farther behind. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. So hiring somebody like sales strategy, sales consultant who understands your world, who work with clients like yourself and help them simplify the system, make it simple, make it easy, and make it repeatable to your salespeople. Then you support your salespeople. You also don't have to rely on superstars, right? If you have a superstar, great for you. If you don't give them a lot of attention, they can still pull it off. But what if you need more salespeople, and what if relying on the superstar is not an option? The truth is, if you create a system and process that is repeatable, you can train anybody on it. It doesn't have to be a superstar, which very often is expensive.
Yeah, it is. Or hard to keep. Hard to keep.
Or hard to keep because they have options.
Mhm.
You know, and so I think the challenge becomes, I think the opportunity, I should say, the opportunity for companies becomes when they realize they grew big enough, or they grew to that point that they cannot handle every department themselves, and they could use some help, temporary help. Somebody comes and helps them out.
Yeah.
That's probably my best advice.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that there's also a different path if we talk about franchisee selling the service locally versus like FranDev. I think those are quite different processes, although I know they have similarities. Tell me, when you're working with a system and you start, how do you help them identify gaps in the franchisee behavior? Because that feels like it's one step even further removed. FranDev, it's usually all in house, right? Or it's consultants. How do you help franchisors identify gaps in the selling process at the franchisee level? That feels like that would be pretty difficult.
Again, it starts with questions, because it starts with question, and it helps to understand who they recruit as the franchisees. Mm-hmm. Because you can recruit really franchisees that are going to help you grow, and you can recruit franchisees that are going to just drown you. It may sound very cruel right now what I'm saying, mm-hmm. but this is the reality of the business, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like in sports, like you mentioned, who is on your team determine how well you guys going to do.
Right.
You have fantastic team players, you know that everybody here is, on the A game. But if you recruit kind of from a D players, well, that's who you have on your team. Mm-hmm. So it starts with recruitment, starts with business development, actually on the franchisor level. Who are we bringing? How we want to structure our, so to speak, downline, right? Because that's kind of what franchisees look like. And it's huge from that point. So that's step one. Step two is, okay, if we're recruiting certain group, how we help. Because if you're recruiting people that already know sales, know customer service, let's say that's the type of franchise we are in, it makes it so much easier. It comes naturally to them, right? If you're suddenly recruiting from a pool of people that don't fit in that criteria, let's say we have a fashion and we're recruiting from accounting pool of people, right? Fantastic individuals. They have, however, different skills. Can we adjust as a franchisor our sales processes and our training to those individuals to make them successful? Because that's how I see the job of a franchisor. Their job is to be a training facility to make the franchisees successful.
Yeah, I agree with you. And interesting, a good franchise model, McDonald's. They came out with the McDonald's way, or at least somebody coined that phrase as they wrote the book about it years ago, about how every role, you have to have everything well defined, right? Processes, right? Even cooking French fries seems easy, but they defined every process well. But you also have to have a different aspect of that, is you have to have the right person in the role. If you hire someone who is a big picture thinker and who is trying to advance their career, and you try to hire them to cook French fries, they're going to be bored to death. They're going to fail. They're going to leave. Same thing in the franchising world. We were talking about this before, Magda, but if I hire someone who's got a great background in fashion design, they made a lot of money and they exited, and then I'm trying to put them into, let's say, owning a franchise that's very tedious. Let's say a maid service franchise where they're going to be scheduling and managing operational minutia all the time, but I've got a very creative person over here with a lot of money. Most franchisors that I work with, where I see gaps, is they define the demographics well, and you have this much in liquid assets, this much in net worth, and they should be in this market, and they have that all mapped out. But what they don't have mapped out is they also need to have very gregarious, extroverted, attitude. They need to have some experience approaching people and closing sales, and those are the things that they tend to not think about in recruiting, like you're saying. And then and especially early franchisees, we mentioned this a little earlier, franchisors, they just want to get a dozen people, right? There's a magic number they're trying to hit, so they feel like their revenue will be stable, and then they're self-sustaining, and their growth is going to be funded by the royalty payments. Well, the problem that they get is they throw everyone in, and then they've got 10 operators that are operating at 70, 60% of what their capacity should be because they got the wrong person. So I agree with you 100%, and I've seen it a lot. And now 5 years later, the franchisors are saying, boy, we need to try to replace or resell that territory because I sold Washington, D.C. to somebody who's only producing 1/3 of the revenue that should be coming from that territory.
Yep. And that is one of the biggest problems that I see a lot of franchisors maybe haven't thought through initially. Maybe by going after, like you said, the big growth, they thought a body is a body. You know, it's a warm body, it will do. They have some money, great, let's go. It kind of bites them in the back, and fixing it is much harder than planning ahead.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%. And you know, it makes me think, so when diagnosing the problem is one part of the process, right? And I hate to use the word problem, but diagnosing the challenge that they're facing. But let's talk about, okay, when we recognize that we've got people that are they're not the best person for the role, but processes, training, and tools can sometimes help elevate them from maybe a C- performer to an A- or a B+, right? Sometimes in the franchise world, you don't have the option to terminate a contract without recourse, right? So you have to figure out now, okay, now what do I do that I put myself in this situation? What would you say are some of the things that franchise systems should be thinking about as they build out their sales process? Because if that's built well from the beginning, even your C players, if you recruit the wrong person, can still perform at a B+ level. Sometimes that's good enough. What are some key components that they should have in that process?
Just to make sure I'm asking you, I understand your question correctly. You're asking me if a franchise is starting and they're building the initial sales process, what should they consider?
That's exactly what I would love to know.
First of all, they should consider who is the ideal client. Mm-hmm. Just like with any business, right? Is asking themselves the same question. Yeah. And because that ideal client, you know, will require certain type of training. Everybody will require a certain amount of training. But if we know who best fits that profile in terms of personality, in terms of investment, in terms of qualifications in general, mm-hmm. our life in 2, 3 years, 5 years will be so much easier.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see this unless you talk to somebody who's done it several times, or to other franchisors or to other consultants. So I would highly recommend to people to actually talk to consultants and to other franchisors what has been the biggest problems. Mm-hmm. So they actually hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what they may be expecting, why somebody maybe is guiding them that direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So recruiting, they're recruiting the right individuals in terms of clients, recruiting the right individuals in terms of who is going to be selling and how, creating this sales process, you know, make it really simple. In terms of the process, transparency, we already talked to them. A structure, you know, creating structure and tools. And even with the best structure, if you don't think about the tools you're going to need in the future, I think this is where I see a lot of dark holes, where the franchisor has so many actually different documents, so many different tools to track leads, to track progress, to track everything they need, that suddenly they find themselves overwhelmed and they said, oh shoot, we need to start over again with something different, something more robust, something that provides us with the right elements, right? Like, right. So finding the right tools is as crucial as the structure itself, I would say. You need to know what you're going to need in the future, and it's hard to see if this is your first franchise. It's hard to see. So talk to experts. I would suggest something so simple as, you have multi-unit business. Can you schedule on different time zones? Mm-hmm. Does your tool allow this? You know, something that simple. You would think, of course, every software does it. No, it doesn't. Uh-huh. And suddenly you have to move data. You know, can you move data easily from one software to another, or is that a problem? You know, can you easily see the progress of the leads? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or is that, you know, did you think that this is going to be just one-time close? You know, one call close and things are great. You know, it's not going to be that way. It's a system. It needs to be there. You know. Can you sell different, you know, when it comes to franchisor, if they are setting the sales process, can your tool whatever CRM you're using, whatever tool you're using, can they show the territories you have available to sell? Can the salesperson easily see that? Can they see documents available? Because we know in franchise is so highly regulated, you actually need to have document for every year, for every state. So they need to see that. It's so there's a lot of those little minutia things that are very important actually up front. Most people I don't think they think about which software. They just say whichever I like. This one has nice logo, let's go with it,
Yeah,
that's the least important. I'm sorry.
They say, oh, I've used this one before, and I used to sell software. I've used this one before, or I've heard good things about this one, or no one ever got fired for buying that one. And those are the decisions that I get to clean up on a regular basis. Yeah, that's a very good point of feedback.
Some software don't even release your data. No. You put all the hundreds and thousands of leads, and suddenly when you're trying to move, they hold you hostage. And you're like, oh, do I hire now somebody to rewrite one by one?
Oh man, no. Yeah, that's a good gotcha to pay attention to. I love, so a couple of things I took notes on, Magda, that I thought we should come back to are structure, sales structure and sales tools. And the thoughts that crossed my mind were, in most franchise systems, especially service-based systems, the franchise owner usually has to wear 3 or 4 hats when they first buy, because they're small, right? And if they have a small startup cost, usually that means that they're doing all the work themselves. But that means they have to be the lead qualifier when it comes in. Then they have to be the closer to make sure they close the business. And they have to be the project manager to make sure it gets scheduled. Then they have to be the actual executor, the person that goes out and does the work for the operator, I guess, in that point. And then they have to be the customer success manager when they come back to the office and make sure they build the reputation online and all those things. Sales structure is really important, where a lot of people are really good at certain parts of it and not at others. Especially the initial engagement, I see that's where a lot of franchise systems, they struggle. New lead comes in, I'm busy, I'm really good at operating and scheduling and managing projects. I'm going to focus on that, and I'll get to those new leads later. I tend to see that the structure is broken because there's nobody who's responsible for that other than the same person that's responsible for everything else. Have you seen that as well, Magda? And how have you helped people address that structural issue where the franchise owner is doing everything, and so they're not really focused on anything, if that makes sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. It's quite overwhelming when you're buying into that kind of business, or any kind of business for that matter. But yeah, with franchise, it feels like everything falls on your head, right? On your business owner head. And handling the leads, I think at this point, what the franchisee is experiencing, the new owner, is that there is so much to handle. And naturally, we choose what we feel the most comfortable about.
Right.
Right. So it goes back to training from the franchisor. They need to evaluate how the future franchisee is going to handle, like you said, from operation to selling leads to collecting the money to doing the job.
Yeah.
So that goes back to franchisor. The other thing, there's always a question of, do I spend money that I just invested? I may have money, I may not have money to maybe hire somebody to process the leads right away. Do I pay maybe to a software that can help me process this faster? Maybe it goes directly from my lead operational tool to my cell phone, and maybe right away rings my phone, right? So I can pick it up. Maybe automatically responds to the clients and say, thank you so much for contacting us. We'll be back with you within half hour. What specific problems do you have? So they are beautiful software like this. I'm sure you're familiar with that because if I'm not mistaken, your software does that too, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So that is a huge help, because when you are new to business, I honestly remember when I was in business, because I own several businesses with my husband, and there were several nights that I think we slept maybe 2-3 hours. There was often you staring at the ceiling and wondering, how am I going to handle all of it? So anything that can simplify your system, your processes, your operational from start to finish, it's welcome. And I think a lot of people, Dave, this is the sad part. A lot of people don't know about softwares that can handle all. Like a client, Heather, forgive me, this is my third language, okay? I knew I'm gonna probably mispronounce your company's name. can't handle a lot of the stuff. And again, you want to make it simple for yourself. If you're a new business owner, you're a new franchisee, make it simple. What is one tool, maybe two max, that you need to have and can handle most of your stuff? I think that's the most important. It needs to be easy to manage.
I agree.
Because you are busy. You cannot suddenly go home after, so many hours of work and suddenly responding to emails and realizing I lost so many access to possibly hot leads because I'm responding after 8-12 hours. Well, 8-12 hours, the client move on. No matter what you have been doing, the windows to close, it's within 10 minutes from the time they reach you. By 10 minutes, I consider the lead dead.
Yeah. Yep.
So if I work with sales team and they said, oh, I respond to my leads, within 48 hours.
Why respond at all? Honestly, there's no point at that point.
It.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Something, there are tools and that's what breaks my heart when I see new business owners that struggle so much with the time management, because we all have only 24 hours and there is so much on your head when you are new to business.
Yeah, especially starting out. I agree 100%. Interestingly, I think that I've seen a lot, kind of a move with a lot of the franchise systems that I work with to try to centralize call center functions or new lead engagement teams, and not just franchise systems, but some of the dealership groups that I work with as well. That's an interesting trend that I'm seeing, because I think they're seeing the structure problems. Maybe some of them are your clients, and they're someone's diagnosing and saying, look, you've got a structure issue where these guys are working 12 hours a day trying to on the operations of the business. They don't have time for this, so we need to restructure it, or you need to have that in your hiring plan, that you hire a lead qualifier. So that's an interesting move I've seen a number of people make recently, but it's hard. It's hard to even, because the quality of engagement goes down typically when you centralize it, and the individual local owners, they feel like they're losing control of the most important part of the process. So that in of itself is a different podcast topic, which we might have to do another day.
But Dave, I would like to add one more thing to this. Please. You ask what the future of somebody who thinks about franchising, should think about sales processes. They actually should take it from the back end. Start from the franchisee and seeing what would they need, what would they struggle with, and kind of look through those patterns all the way to coming to the franchisor, right?
Yeah.
And evaluating from that point, because it's so much easy to start with the right software, then transition to something different. Once people can learn, even quite complicated and robust system, but if they have to switch from one to another, it's another thing they add into the days, and it's scary and it's time consuming and it's just hard. It's just much harder. So if you choose the right tools from the beginning, it's so much easier on everybody.
Yeah, and it's less expensive in the end, honestly, even though they might say, oh, this will cost me a little more money. Better to spend that, $10 more per month now than to have to spend $150,000 just to migrate to a proper tool later. I've seen people make that mistake, and that's really good advice. Well, we've got a couple of minutes, Magda, and I wanted to ask your advice about the closing process. And if you don't mind, maybe share a little bit of your insights about what are some best practices in creating sales processes that result in higher close rates?
Absolutely. First of all, evaluate what's happening. Evaluate what's happening, because any structure and process is better than the best salesperson you can hire shooting from the hip. If you have good system and process, if you evaluate, if you ask a lot of questions, create easy to follow system, you can really replicate the same results over and over again. And that's what a lot of my clients have benefited from, that they have a system that actually works really well. So no matter who they plug and play, it's easy. It's just seamless. It moves on. Everybody knows what's happened in step 1, in step 2, in step 3, and here is closing, and it happens naturally. Yeah. Right? Just like we know people can lead, even the best people can lead prospect through the client's journey really well, and they get to close and something happened, okay? It's either they're trying to hard sell them, or they have some other issues that just blocks them, okay? And it just becomes this, I don't know, why I'm losing sales. if you have the right system and process created, that close happens naturally. Taking money, moving to, the money transition, it just should happen so seamlessly. If you have the qualified prospects, if you're moving them through the process that is answering all of the questions, objections, and you understand what they are, the client should be like, where do I sign?
Mhm.
It should be that simple, right? So I think those are the most important things that clients should work on. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just creating sales processes and that are just easy to close. It just
Yeah.
moves seamlessly. It's natural. It's, that's kind of one of the things that it's exciting to me, because if I see the team that I work with moving nicely and they said, oh, close is just easy breezy now. I know by step 3, I already have it. It's just a matter of now.
Mhm.
That makes me very happy. That's
Yeah.
exciting, little coaching, a little system and processes, and my clients just can see right away return on investment and, immediate results. Yay. For me, that's like party.
Yeah, I agree with you. As you started describing that, I was laughing because one of my clients, they're a franchise system, and one of their franchise owners, we noticed that they had a lot kind of a backlog where they had a lot of people getting to kind of this quoted stage, but not as many people closing. So we looked at, they were underperforming quite a bit. So we took a look at what was going on in their account, and he called her. It was a business owner, and she's in a really good territory. There's a lot of lead flow. And he said, well, tell me about closing. Like, why aren't you closing as many deals? He knew the right question to ask because he had the visibility into the data. And then she said, well, I figure if they want to buy from me, they'll just call me back and they'll book an appointment. And I was like, oh no. And he's like, Dave, I talked to her for like 15 minutes and I tried to explain to her and help her understand that all she's got to do is text them back or call them one more time and she'll probably close 3 or 4 times as many. And then he said this, he said, yeah, but she's not sure if she wants to staff that many more crews to go and take care of the work. And I was like, what? Like, how do you get to that point where like, I got enough work, I guess I'm good. Like I'm making, it was so funny to me. But
that's a great point to be in on one side, on the other side, yeah, for us who like are so passionate about closing, and helping people buy what they want to buy and helping people be more successful, it's hard to understand. But on the other side, it's kind of nice to be in that point where it's like, well, if I sell, it's not a big deal.
I know, how nice is that? But at the same time, maybe turn down the marketing a little bit because you're burning a lot of capital to generate all those leads, right? Like it's
Yeah.
that was a unique one. You don't run into that a lot, but I think I have enough work. I should be fine. They'll call me back if they want to buy from me. Like, all right.
That's a funny one.
Yeah. Well, Magda, this has been lovely. I appreciate your insights. I'd love to ask you more, and maybe we'll have to do another podcast in the future just about some best practices in closing techniques. But I think you really defined it well. It's not really the Glengarry, Glen Ross, hard close. It's really, there's a process. And if you build, I used to call those playbooks, right? If you help people build the right playbook, proper sales stages, you understand who you're talking to and what you're accomplishing at every stage, so it moves along naturally. People, a lot of people could be pretty good sales folks. They just don't realize it because they think it's got to be scary and high pressure, and it really shouldn't be.
No, you're absolutely. It was absolutely pleasure, Dave. You're absolutely right. It can be really simple.
Yeah. Magda, thanks again for joining us, guys. Make sure you look her up, Magda Fox, on LinkedIn if you need some help. Thanks again.